Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Miha and welcome to the channel. Have you ever had a conversation with ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, and everything's going well? But then about 20, 30 minutes in, it looks like the model's drifting off. It's forgotten some of your instructions, or maybe it's moved away from the role that you assigned it to play. Well, if you've noticed this, you're not alone and you're not hallucinating. Technical researchers call this identity collapse. This happens because of something called a context window limit. So every AI model has a certain number of tokens or a certain amount of memory it can use for your conversations. Once that memory is used up, it has to make room. How does it make room? Well, it has to forget something that you already discussed. And what does it forget? It usually starts off at the very top and forgets your instructions. Today, I'm going to show you exactly why this happens using a whiteboard as an analogy, and I'll also talk about a few other reasons why AI might start to drift. Finally, I'll give you a practical tip on what you can do to help alleviate this. First, let's have a look at what's happening inside the model. Now, imagine that AI is an intern, and this intern has a whiteboard that they can use to store your instructions. They have no long-term memory. They can only use what is on the whiteboard in front of them. At the beginning, you write instructions at the very top, and the AI knows exactly what it needs to do. But as you converse, the board slowly fills up, and eventually it will run out of space. To write new questions, the intern has to erase something. Now, they're not going to erase something at random in the middle. They're going to start at the top. So your strict editor instructions vanish. Now, your intern, your AI model is still very smart. They've just forgotten what the initial instructions were at the very start of the conversation. Now, you may be thinking, but I'm using Gemini's new model. It has a 1 million token context model. That's enough to remember 10 entire books. Do I still have to worry about it? And the short answer is yes, and there's data to prove it. Researchers from NVIDIA and Microsoft have found that while these new models are great at storage, they struggle with focus. This is called the lost in the middle phenomenon. Even if the model hasn't technically forgotten your instructions, it stops paying attention to them because it's distracted by the thousands of other words in the rest of your conversation. It's like the whiteboard might be really huge and it's not full, but your intern has to stand so far away to see the entire whiteboard that they can't make up the text at the very top. Now, before I show you the fix, I want to give you a few other explanations of why AI models may drift away from your initial instructions. It's not all related to memory. The first is called context pollution. Now, these models generally believe what they write. So if you ask AI to help you edit a document, you want a very professional tone. And in step 5, you miss some slang in an edit, and you continue working with it without correcting that, by step 20, AI might say, maybe this is just how we talk now, and you're going to see more and more slang. In other words, AI can develop bad habits if you don't correct it. Another potential culprit is temperature. Temperature is a setting in models on how creative they can be. In tools like LM Studio, for example, you can directly control this. A high temperature means that the model is more creative. It's almost like rolling the dice to see what the next word is. It'll be really creative, come up with interesting things, but it could drift from your original instructions. On the other hand, a low temperature, say 0.2 or 0.3, is much stricter, so a model is more likely to stay within the bounds that you set it. And the final is a safety reset. These models have generally been designed to be helpful and polite. So if your conversation or your role play gets too intense or too complex, an internal set of instructions might tell it, hey, this is going in a direction that we can't handle or I'm not allowed to talk about. Let's reset and go back. When that happens, the model could also forget your initial set of instructions. So how do we fix this, right? Whether it's running out of memory or whether it's pollution or whether there's been some kind of a reset. Well, I like to think about it as a sticky note. Going back to our whiteboard analogy, it's like adding a sticky note to the bottom of the whiteboard, just as a reminder to our intern of what we're doing. So what does this reminder look like? Well, every 20 to 30 prompts, I'll usually ask the AI, stop what we're doing and ask, do you remember the initial instructions we were doing? And I'll paste the initial instructions again, and then continue with the conversation. That's really all it takes. In other words, just a reminder. This is why I like the intern example, right? You're working with a new employee, somebody who probably has a lot of knowledge, they're very excited, they have a lot of energy, but they might drift off because they don't have that experience to keep them focused. And so by doing this, I'm essentially forcing the intern to go back to the whiteboard, make sure there's always a sticky note on it that reminds them what exactly we were doing and why. Now, how often should you do this? This really depends on the model you're using. If I'm using ChatGPT or Gemini for a conversation, I may do it every 20, 30 prompts, or when I get the sense that it's starting to drift, I will stop what we're doing, remind it of the instructions, and then continue. If, however, I'm using my local model running LM Studio, I'll do it much more often because the context window or the memory of my computer at home is a lot more limited compared to, say, the kind of servers, data centers that ChatGPT or Gemini run on. So, next time you have a conversation with a model and you think it's drifting off, remember, it's not you. It's not that the model is flawed. Simply take a step back, remind it of what you were doing, and then continue with your task. I hope this video gave you a simple insight into why your model might be drifting and gave you a very simple tip on how you can deal with that. If you enjoyed this content, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.